In this demo, we want to develop a class to maintain triangles using our point class. So we start by creating a triangle file and adding the preprocessor directives. If not defined, so we define this class triangle. We can specify a triangle with its 3 vertices. So we declare 3 data members, which are pointers to the object of the point class. Vertex 1, vertex 2, and vertex 3. We can also define setters and getters for each of these data members. We need to pass a point as an argument to this function, and then we use that point to update the value of vertex 1. So we need to dereference this pointer and update the value of the point object that this pointer is pointing to with value p. Similarly for vertex 2 and 3. And then we define the getter function that returns a point, get vertex 1, it returns the point that vertex 1 pointer is pointing to. We have the same thing for vertex 2 and 3. Now we need to declare the constructor. So point 1, 2, and 3. Inside this function, we just need to initialize the data members using the address of these points. In order to test our program, we also need to define a print function here. So in order to print each of the vertices, we can use the print function of point class. So this print function will print the point. So we just need to use this syntax to get to the vertex, and then in order to access the print function, we need another arrow, and we call the function. We can use the same thing for the other 2 points. So we need to include IOStream and include point We also need to include triangle.hpp here. In order to test our program, we are gonna declare 3 objects of points, and we can pass the coordinates to the constructor. So the first point is 1, 1. The second one is 2, 2. And the third one is 3, 3. Now we can declare an object of triangle class and pass these 3 points as arguments to the constructor. So our constructor takes 3 points. Then we can just call the print function. So here we have the vertices of the triangle with the right coordinates. Now let's declare another constructor that takes the coordinates directly. So double p1x, double p1y, and coordinates of the second and third point. Inside this constructor, we need to allocate memory using the new operator. So we have new point with p1x, p1y as arguments. Now let's try this new constructor. So triangle T2, and we are gonna pass the coordinates of the first point, the coordinates of the second point, and coordinates of the third point. So this constructor works fine as well. Now that we dynamically allocate memory inside our class, we need the destructor, copy constructor, and copy assignment constructor. So we are gonna start by destructor. So we are gonna have tilde triangle. Inside this function, we are gonna delete the dynamic memory allocated for each of the vertices by delete operator. our first constructor doesn't allocate memory using the new operator. So when we try to destroy an object that has been constructed with this constructor, we will get an error. So I'm just gonna comment this line, the first constructor, and these two. Now we need to overload the copy constructor. The copy constructor has the same name as the class, and we pass a constant reference of triangle type as an argument. Inside this function, we first need to allocate memory for each of the vertices, new point, and then we initialize this newly allocated point, which we can access by dereferencing this pointer by the coordinates of the first vertex of the original object. We're gonna do the same thing for the other two. In order to check this function, I'm gonna overload another print function that gets a triangle as an argument. So when we call this function, the copy constructor will be automatically called. And inside this function, we are simply call the tprint. So when we call this print function, the copy constructor will be called. It was the copy constructor. And it allocates memory for the new object, which is this triangle T here, and copy all the values to this new object. And inside this function, we just call the print for the new object. The last function that we need to overload is the copy assignment operator. This function returns a reference to the object of this class and also takes a constant reference to another object of this class as an argument. First of all, we need to make sure that we are not self-assigning. So if this is not equal to the address of T, we are gonna continue. Otherwise, we are gonna just return this object. Inside this branch, we first need to deallocate the dynamic memory of data members. need to allocate new memory with this syntax. And then we are gonna initialize this new object with the values of the original object. So let's try this function. We can declare another object of this class and pass zeros, and then try to update T1 with T2, and finally call T1.print. So when we use this operator, first of all, the memory which is allocated to these points in the constructor will be freed up, and then we allocate new memory, and then we use the data members of the original object to initialize these newly allocated memories. Instead of defining one pointer for each vertex, we can define a pointer to an array of vertices. Now let's modify the rest of the program based on this change. So we'll start with the constructor. Instead of allocating 3 memories, we can allocate one chunk of memory for an array of size 3. And then we access each of the items by this syntax, and then we use the setters of point class to set the coordinates of each point. So we'll have the same thing for y. And then for the second and third point. Let's update the print function as well. So in the print function, we can iterate over elements of the array. And then we print these vertices I.print. So let's just try this first function to make sure that it works correctly. We just need to fix the index here. Now let's try to update the next function, which is the copy constructor. In the copy constructor, we need to allocate memory for an array of size 3, and then we don't need the dereferencing operator anymore, so we can access each of the elements by this syntax. Similarly, for the right hand side, we can have this syntax. We also need to update the print function here. So in this function, nothing is gonna change because we have already updated this print function that we are gonna call here. And here, so we just need to call print function like this. It works perfectly too. The next function is the destructor. We can simply use this syntax to free up the memory of the array. I'm just gonna run the program to see if we get any error. The last function that I'm going to update is the copy assignment operator. Inside this function, we first need to deallocate memory of this variable. So we use this syntax, and then we are gonna allocate new memory by this syntax. And finally, we need to initialize the elements of this array using the vertices of the original triangle. So we can use this syntax to do the update here. Now it's your turn to try and test this code to see if you can find any problem in it, and also update the setters and getters of this class.